Well, after a slow start to 2025, FMCSA sure has been busy lately. Whether they've been working on the integration of the National Medical Registry into state licensing agencies, issuing new English language proficiency guidance, or even publishing emergency rules about who can obtain a non-domiciled CDL, FMCSA has definitely increased their output as of late. And whenever this happens, enforcement gets busy too, interpreting final rules or making sense of vague guidance to new enforcement policies. The questions are abound. That makes CVSA meetings and workshops important places to be. It's where federal and state CMV enforcement meet to work out all them details, and it's of tremendous impact to the industry. Fortunately for us, one of our own, Steve Keppler, attended and participated in the meeting. He's agreed to join us today, notebook in hand, to help us unpack all of the discussions and action items that came out of that meeting. Also joining us today is your friend and mine, Bert Mayo, VP of Risk Solutions for TrueNorth Companies. He's a former safety director and an all-around fun guy. So stick around. This is one you won't want to miss. All right. Well, welcome back to the podcast. Two of my absolute favorite people, my co-host and partner in crime, Steve Keppler, here with Bert Mayo, just a troublemaker from TrueNorth, here to provide a little additional context. Happy to get you here to talk about the last CVSA meeting they just had. We're fortunate because Steve Keppler is sort of an elected member, helping to lead the allied group or the associates group, which he'll describe in a little bit. But that means that we didn't have to have an outside expert because we got one right here in-house. So thank you very much, Steve Keppler, for agreeing to do this, and welcome.
Thank you. I don't know if you call me an expert, but I try. Give it my best effort. Thanks a lot for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Today you're an expert. All right. Well, so maybe we'll just dive right in and we'll just talk sort of high level about, for the folks that don't know who CVSA is, and I do believe in my heart they should know who CVSA is. Steve, can you just tell us a little bit about who they are, the makeup of their membership, what they do, and why all those people listening should care?
You know, they're a nonprofit, and they represent primarily the enforcement members in the United States, Canada, and Mexico that are charged with commercial vehicle safety and enforcement. And mostly in the U.S., it's the agencies that receive federal money from FMCSA as part of the grant program. But there's every jurisdiction. They also have local agencies, local police departments around the country that do commercial enforcement.
These are the folks pulling our trucks over.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's not derogatory. That's just a statement of fact.
No, but I think it's an important distinction because there's about 750,000 cops in the United States, and there's about 13,000 CVSA certified law enforcement individuals. So it's a small.
Well, Sean, I think you bring up a good point, Stephen. I guess I actually encourage you to expand a little bit because I sat in the seat of a safety director of a mid-sized motor carrier for quite some time, 250 to 300 trucks depending on the month. And I can tell you CVSA was never a normal part of our conversation. And I think that's true in a lot of that mid-sized motor carrier. They know regulations come from somewhere. They know it's enforced on the side of the road, but I'm not sure a lot of people do know what they are and what they do.
No, you're right, Bert. And if you look at it from a resource perspective, I mean, half of FMCSA's annual budget goes to the states in the form of grant money. So and FMCSA has about 1,100 employees. So, I mean, from a sheer resource perspective, the states are really the ones that are delivering a large portion. Even when you look at investigations that are done by federal and state people, I mean, federal folks do a large majority of them, but the states do a large chunk too, and they do all of the safety audits. So they're really, from an enforcement perspective, that's now any cop can write a ticket to a truck that's speeding or running a traffic light or whatever, but the ones that are doing the inspections, the CVSA sets the standards for those doing those inspections, and they develop the training for those doing those inspections. So they're really a big force behind that, making the whole program tick. And that's why people should care, because those actions by those enforcement people impact not only on that driver, on their driver record, but also on that motor carrier that employs those drivers in the form of sanctions or fines or safety ratings, which, as insurance companies care about, certainly customers care about. So it's not just those actions, paying that fine to pay the fine off, but it's all the other stuff that's happening in the back office that a lot of carriers don't know about, what happens with all the results of that information when it's done.
Yeah, and I think through this conversation, we'll certainly demonstrate like how this organization can really impact how we keep our wheels spinning on the highway. Can you tell us a little bit about, some of the committees, like how they do their work, just in brief, and perhaps more importantly, how the industry has an opportunity to interact with these folks as they make and deliberate big decisions that could impact them on the roadside?
No, I think, the big thing they're known for is the out of service criteria. And that's the kind of the pass fail criteria of the regulations, at least at the roadside. And so they have, technical committees, whether it's, vehicle or driver or hazardous materials or passenger carrier or training, there's a number of different technical committees that kind of do the work of the Alliance. And there's 5 regions that have voting representation on the committees, and the associates, the industry, has voting representation on those committees. And CVSA will tell you that, they can't do their job without the industry. They're not engineers. They're not building stuff for trucks, right? They're not building ELD devices, right? They're not building that stuff. So they need that engineering expertise from the industry, not only on the widgets and how they pass fail, but also understand from the industry how operationally these things impact on their business. Because the out of service criteria theoretically is an imminent hazard condition. And so what are we going to shut down a driver or a vehicle for on the roadside for a safety defect? And so it's important that the industry has a voice, and CVSA wants those voices. And so industry is able to shape those decisions, at least have an input to those decisions as they contemplate them.
Well, what's the criteria for attending or participating? Can any motor carrier show up at the annual conference?
Absolutely. It's open. Obviously they're a member organization. So if you want to join, there's dues associated. If you attend the conference, there's fees you have to pay, but you don't have to be a member to be there. Anyone can attend. And frankly, all their meetings are open too. Even the board meetings are open. So anyone can attend the committee meetings. They can attend the board meetings. You can speak up even if you're not a member of the committee. If you're in the audience, you can speak up, and they encourage that. And so it's a very public facing organization, and they want that input, and they try and keep as much open as public and transparent as they can.
I think that's one of the things that I liked best about attending those meetings was that even if I wasn't sitting at the table, I could have an impact on the conversation from around the dais, and they would let you speak, and the committee could try to absorb what you were saying. And we'd often have great conversations in that room, but also in the hallway afterwards as an opportunity to meet with some of those enforcement folks and get their perspective on imminent hazard or violation or whatever the case may be. So I couldn't agree more that it's a great group. Now, I personally, would like industry to be, to have maybe a little bit more, oomph at the table, maybe at the board setting, but, maybe that's a conversation for another day. And we only have an hour. So instead of just a full-on infomercial for CVSA, maybe we should talk about the meeting, Steve. So maybe we can start off by maybe you can set the scene. We're in beautiful Denver, Colorado. There are police vehicles swarming the scene. I don't know if that actually happened, but mountains in the background, and then you're stuck in a hotel conference room. What's the themes? How's it going?
It's a work event. I mean, it's a 16-hour day thing, and so you don't get a chance to see. Now, one last thing I'll mention though for our listeners that I want to make sure anyone can submit an issue for the committees to talk about. Yeah. Anybody. you can go on their website and publicly put an issue request.
What's an issue? Give an example of an issue quick.
Should a driver be put out of service for ELD tampering or fraud? Should a driver be put out of service for not having a logbook?
Not having their glasses on their face.
Not having corrective lenses. So it really can, and that's an important distinction, and it's publicly available on their website. So now you have to have, justification for your request.
Of course.
But anyway, I just did want to mention that for our listeners.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So I think a big theme, probably two things: driver related issues, whether it's qualifications or hours of service or medical issues. And I think a sense of optimism that finally it looks like there's going to be a new leader for the agency that Congress is going to confirm, and Derek Bars, who actually showed up at the meeting, which was good to see. So I think, so I'd say and he just started Monday. So last week, Monday, a few days before he showed up. So I think those were the over. I mean, there's some, there's a lot, and they had really good attendance, and they had, and some good presentations on different topics. One of the things that they have at almost every conference, but the thing that AMVA was there, and for those that don't know, they represent all the licensing agencies across the country.
For $1, if you can name that acronym, AMVA, I'll give you $1. Come on.
American Motor Vehicle Association.
So close.
But they came to talk about, because it was related to the ELP conversation. What are all the standards required for CDL testing, for the knowledge test, for the skills test? And they went through in minute detail, different aspects of that, because that continues to be an ongoing conversation. And this issue of, well, how are we letting drivers get their license if they're not proficient? So, it's you hear all this stuff in the media, right? How, there's three sides to every story. So I think having them there and talking about that really helps the deliberations of the committees to talk about, okay, what's real, what's not, what do we really need to do?
What does the data say?
Yeah, exactly. FMCSA talked about the ELP enforcement data they're seeing so far. And so a lot of also what happens is IRP is there, IFTA is there, UCR is there, the NTSB is there, National District Attorneys Association, and the Traffic Law Center was there because there was discussions about masking and what's happening in the courts out in the country. So as topics are talked about, they try and bring in the relevant authoritative bodies to kind of give input, or at least give context to the conversations to help make better decisions.
All right, well, let's talk about that context then a little bit before I let everybody know it is the American Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators, ANVA. These are the folks that represent DMVs across the country. So, Bert, you can put that $1 in the mail. I'll give you the address after this.
I'm writing the check right now, Sean. One and.
All right. So, Steve, let's start with driver qualifications. You said one of the biggest themes that we had was driver-related issues. We've had a whole bunch of hot topics in the media well before and leading up to, and even just after this meeting happened. Can you talk to us a little bit about what folks were talking about from a licensing, from a qualification issue, English language proficiency, non-domicile, a lot of stuff brewing up in this storm.
Yeah.
What did you hear?
Yeah, I mean, another reason why AMA was there, we'll start with the medical side, was because of all the consternation going on with the NR2 rule implementation and the challenges that industry is dealing with in enforcement. And so, and the outcome of those conversations were a couple things. Number one, CVSA is revising. They've got an inspection bulletin giving advice to enforcement on how to enforce the MedCert rule. But there's still a number of states that I think our listeners know, still are not compliant, and some probably won't be for at least 9 months, probably longer.
Yeah, and which means, just for clarification, that means that the state is having a hard time getting the CDL drivers' medical certification appended to their motor vehicle record, which is making it hard for us to keep our drivers running, because the only real source of truth is supposed to be that MVR, right?
Yeah, and so a lot of industry members were, making their voices heard on this issue. They're spending all kinds of money running MVRs. In some cases, they're spending extra money getting drivers requalified because the clinics aren't uploading the medical stuff accurately. All kinds of issues operationally on the industry side. And an outcome of that conversation was the associate members. I carried this message to the board meeting that the associate members requested that CVSA write a petition to FMCSA to request that the NR2 rule be delayed until all the states are ready to go. And the CVSA board approved that. So they're going to be sending a letter to FMCSA to request, let's kind of, because they're continuing to hit waivers, right? The next October 12th, the next deadline, we know some states aren't going to meet it. So let's just push it off until everyone's ready. So whether FMCSA will act on that or not, I think we'll wait and see. But I think that's an example of how, the industry and the enforcement members can come together on an issue that is of concern. So.
Yeah, I just want to clarify for those listening, when Steve refers to the associate members, he's referring to the motor carriers and industry suppliers that have come together. So an associate member, right? Am I getting this right, Steve? Is anybody besides a law enforcement member from
that's
state.
Right. The non-governmental agencies, and so at the meeting, there was about 850 people at the meeting. About a third of them were industry members, and 2/3 were government, of whether it's enforcement or a lot of DOT folks attend too. So,
Steve, not to delay this, to Sean's point earlier, and there's a lot of topics obviously that came out of there we need to talk about, but how does this happen? I mean, just administratively, or maybe it's bureaucratically, right? Maybe is the problem, is that NR2 comes down the pike, motor carriers get on board, states can't get their act together. Who's punished, right? Motor carrier and driver. Ultimately, we got out of services, we got lost revenue. I mean,
that's right, and I think I think that's the frustration that came out, and I think there's a lot of pressure on the licensing agencies right now, right? It's whether it's the English language proficiency, whether it's this NR2 issue. And so, there's the non-domiciled CDL issue too, which was part of a conversation. Then we just saw, an announcement come out of the secretary's office Friday. So there's a lot of focus on the licensing agencies right now for different reasons. And I think that frustration came out at the meeting last week. And I appreciate ANVA being there and listening to this. Hopefully they'll take it back to their members. They will. I know Ian Grossman, who runs that organization, he's a good guy and I think wants to do the right thing. But yeah, it's very, and that's the good thing. There's lots of candid, open conversation that takes place. A lot of it is very unscripted. And it's a healthy conversation.
Well, so don't bury the lead here, Steve. We've already had a whole podcast on English language proficiency. We know non-dom was in there. What did we talk about very specifically? Was there any board action? Is there anything we expect to learn or to know in the future? Or is there any information a carrier can take home?
So two things. One, the driver committee talked about the issue of getting a driver back into service when they're put out of service. That's been an ongoing question that we get from a lot of carriers.
Amen. Come on.
And so the committee referenced some guidance that FMCSA has recently put out on this. That's published on their
link in the description.
Yeah. So, and I think it while it helps a little bit, I don't think it goes far enough in terms of giving more explicit guidance. And so one of the things, so that's one thing, park it for a second. Second thing, the training committee had a pretty robust discussion, lots of questions from enforcement regarding implementation of FMCSA's enforcement guidance. And so the end product of that conversation was they're going to be sending a list of questions to FMCSA. FMCSA committed to provide responses to those questions back to CVSA. Hopefully they'll make that information public. That was talked about. They said they need to have their counsel review it, but I think they're going to try to do that the best they can. The end product of those conversations was the associate.
What are the types of questions? I'm sorry to belabor this, but do you know the flavor of questions, or have you seen the list?
I haven't seen the list.
Okay.
I haven't seen the list, and I was in the driver committee when the training committee was going on, so I couldn't be in as much as I would like to be.
I imagine it's about assessment. How exactly do I assess? How do we be more objective, and
yes.
and how to get back into service and those types of things?
Yeah. So questions have come up about, okay, how do we administer the question part of the test, right? And how do we know how right is right, or how proficient the driver is, right? And so, and also questions around the guidance. What do we need to document in the roadside inspection report have come up to try and create some standardization. So the driver knows and the carrier knows. So some of those things, how do we appropriately assign it from a violation perspective in the database, because there's different violations that can be written. And so we want to make sure there's consistency there. So I think, those types of questions, and to help with the training, making sure the training is consistent and the guidance is being applied uniformly across the country.
Steve, can you deny or confirm, because every time I turn on social media today, which isn't much at my age, but we have declared 277,000 drivers out of service. That seems extreme. Do we have numbers on that at all?
Yeah, there's been about 14,000 citations the first 2 months, and about 40, somewhere a little over 4,000 drivers put out of service.
Okay. So, and do they track how many got back in based off of the retraining or the reassessment?
Well, no, they don't. But that issue also came up again. Came up at the meeting. That was one of the questions. What if we find a driver that has previously been cited? What do we do with them? Do we cite him for jumping an out of service order? So I think those are the types of questions that have come up. I think legit questions.
Did the committee take any action on that about whether to cite him as an out of service? That would seem like something a committee would make a recommendation on.
They did not, because I think the thing that what a lot of this is, because CVSA has been really helping really push this to FMCSA, because it's FMCSA's rule, it's their guidance. So they're looking to FMC, and it's their standard. So they're trying to get input from FMCSA, which is why they fielded all these questions to try and get clarity from the agency on. Because I think the CVSA want to make sure that they're consistent in understanding from where this guidance has come from. So
did they decide to petition FMCSA to create a reg in 392 to make it not a service not
yet. That's on their to-do list. Yeah, that's one of the things that's on their to-do list. They have not done that yet, but I think
Bert, last question, I promise. Along this.
Go ahead, fire away.
Y'all know where this subject is for me, and we won't belabor that here. We got 14,000 citations. Now, my understanding initially that I don't understand how we get a citation and don't get the out of service. Either you can, or you are proficient, or you are not proficient. So help bridge that for me.
Well, a large portion of those are commercial zone carriers.
Huge portion.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the big chunk of those.
So any driver that's operating in the commercial zone, most commonly the southern border, as long as they're within that period, they can get a violation. It can't be put out because presumably they're going right back after they drop it.
And that was one of the questions that came up from the discussion, because commercial zone, I don't want to get too far in the weeds here, but
man, you're about to dive right in the deep end.
Commercial zones have clear definitions in the rules, and they're not just the southern border. They're
all over the place.
So that was one of the things that came up as a question: is the commercial zone guidance only for southern border commercial zones? And the answer is yes. So versus commercial zones all over the country. So they get into those types of technical conversations because the enforcement folks are the ones that have to implement all this stuff. So just an example.
Meanwhile, Florida's handing out CDLs in Spanish and 5 other languages like lollipops.
Well, but you're right. That came up too. And
not picking on Florida because it's Texas, it's California, it's Arizona.
So AMVA made the distinction between what's required for the knowledge test versus a skills test. They're different, right? And so I think that was part of their. This is why the knowledge test is allowed to be administered multiple, whether you agree with it or not. That was their point. And so,
wow. Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was just a really, and the last thing on ELP that I'll mention that came out of all these conversations is the associates voted to make a request to the board to petition FMCSA, request FMCSA to release the unredacted version of the ELP guidance memo. And so the CVSA board agreed to do that. So that letter will be going to FMCSA. Now, whether they do that or not, that's their choice. But that was another kind of action that came out of the meeting.
All right. Well, I think there's so much to cover yet, and so many good topics. So we'll keep on going before I play a little game called "Is That a Commercial Zone?" Okay, this is a new game I just invented. Bert, you're up first.
I like your acronym game better. So,
Bert, you're up first. Is Syracuse, New York, a commercial zone?
Just based off of the ridiculousness of that, yes, it is.
It sure is. Okay, Steve Keppler, Topeka, Kansas, is it a commercial zone?
No.
He's probably looking at him. Okay.
No.
All right. Bert, is the Lexington Fayette Urban County, Kentucky, a commercial zone?
Lexington Fayette. No.
It sure is, buddy.
Oh, dang it.
Yeah. So that's just way into the weeds. Please disregard in terms of ELPs and so on and so forth. But there are some pretty great commercial zones, which have been in the regs for years and years and were created for other reasons. So, all right. So let's maybe move on. Boy, where do we want to go from here? I guess I'm interested in talking about this new entrant thing next. And we're going to jump around a little bit here, but I was just interested in all the work. They're doing a lot of work on new entrants, and I think it's a super important issue to try to get our head around. I read your issue brief, Steve, where you talked about the fact that there's so many new carriers in the industry and its possible impact on safety. So can you just tell us what kind of came out of that meeting from that front?
Yeah, no, I think two major things. One is they had a working group as part of their policy committee that developed recommendations on what should a new entrant know in terms of qualifications coming into the business. So they developed specific requirements around that from a regulatory compliance perspective. And they also recommended that new entrant should go through 8 hours of initial training at minimum and a test to establish the proficiency in those specific areas of the rules. So that was an outcome that came out that was voted on and approved. And that will be part of their reauthorization package.
So that's creating priorities for them to advocate on to try to get it into the base bill or whatever.
Right, to get it into the bill, and if there's any statutory requirements that need to be changed.
Sure.
And the second part of it was relating to kind of operationally what changes need to be made, because as I mentioned earlier, the states are the ones that are doing the new entrant safety audits, and about 60,000 plus a year. What changes do we need to make to the audit itself? And I think the biggest shift was to move more towards an educational program versus an enforcement program. Because their view is, because if you look at the data, new entrants are getting in more crashes than ever before. And so they feel that the program needs to change course, become more educational focused versus enforcement focused. And so they came up with a number of recommendations surrounding that. Another key one they recommended is which is a big problem in the program today. Carriers bounce back between, well, am I interstate? Am I intrastate? When am I going interstate?
I was wondering about this conversation.
So they said it doesn't matter whether you're intrastate, you're going to get the audit. We don't care.
Is the idea that carriers bounce back and forth to avoid the audits?
Well, they don't know yet. We may go interstate. We're not sure, but in some cases they are.
Yeah, we worked on one,
right? They're going in, they run into a problem, they step back out and register with another DOT number. So there was a lot of conversation around that. And so they talked about being on-site versus off-site audits. So a number of different recommendations kind of operationally. And then again, that will feed both their conversation with FMCSA, but also Capitol Hill to potentially make any statutory adjustments that might need to be made for the program.
I found that whole we're going to change it from a scary enforcement thing to like a partnership exercise. I found that, I don't know, to be interesting, not inconsistent, I think, with the direction of at least some of the CVSA memberships. Do you think it fits in sort of a broader change of approach, or what do you think they kind of focus on?
I think it's a couple things. I think the states see how inefficient it is today, and they've got fewer and fewer resources to do everything that's continually being loaded on them. And they see the fact that it's not having the impact that it should. And so I give them credit for saying, look, it's not working. We got to try and fix it. And I think it's really to be more efficient, to be focusing on the carriers we should be focusing on, and our resources where we need them most.
Got it. Well, let's switch to data queues and masking. There's been a lot going on, not just at CVSA, but FMCSA had issued a proposed rule a while back, and then a suppler second notice of proposed rulemaking, I think it was, and there's also some stuff happening at Capitol Hill from that standpoint. What was the conversation around data queues and specifically sort of masking? And maybe you should quickly, just in a one sentence, describe what masking is before we jump in.
Yeah, so basically it's when a driver gets cited for a violation roadside and it gets adjudicated through the court system. And many states and have, whether it's something in their statutory law or mostly it happens at the judicial level in the court systems, there's plea downs, plea bargains. A driver that gets cited for a speeding violation at 20 over, they get probation before judgment, first time offense, or it gets pled down to a library fine violation. Right. And
that's important because that speeding violation could ultimately put that driver out of service should it happen again. Right.
That's right. So the idea is it masks the original violation. And so what the carrier sees when they run MVRs, the driver didn't pay their library fine. But in reality, they actually got cited for a speeding. And that's why, for example, the PSP report is important as compared to the MVR, because the PSP report shows the actual violation. And so I think, and the other thing too, ATRI has done, and Sean probably, and Bert probably, I've said this 1,000 times, but their crash predictor study that they've done a number of times shows the violations are a good indicator of future crash risk. So what really came up there is the states are caught in the middle because the money that FMCSA gives to them to deliver the program tells them they can't mask, right? Or there's consequences. But yet they have no control over the judiciary in those states. They're going to do whatever they're going to do, right? And so they're caught in between. stuck in the middle. And so the request was basically to allow to make the request to FMCSA to petition to allow them to make their own judgment call as to whether or not to accept those data queue requests when they're attempting to mask the original violation. So they're not stuck in the middle. They want to be able to say, no, that's a masking violation. We're not going to accept that data queue request for a change. And so that they wanted that flexibility from FMCSA. And so that requires changes because the data queues policy, I don't want to get too far down the weeds, but the data queues policy document is inconsistent. So that came up in the conversation as well. FMCSA has this adjudications policy. FMCSA, during that conversation said, we don't think we can do that because it's not providing due process to the driver and carrier.
That was what I was wondering about. I hardly ever wish we had a lawyer on the call, but
right. So the immediate reaction was, we don't think we can do that because we're not giving that due process. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how that issue works itself out, because that could be a big deal.
I've seen, and maybe y'all have too, some states now on serious violations, I'm seeing them just write the roadside and not the uniform citation. That way there's it is what it is. He still gets the points. The motor carrier still carries those points. I've seen that happen in the Southeast several times now. Yeah. Where in the past it was always a ticket.
And that was one of the reasons why the National District Attorneys Association was there to help. They actually, through a grant from FMCSA, conduct a lot of training to the judicial systems around the country, with the judicial college and things like that, and help provide resources to the states so they can train their prosecutors and the judges around the country to help educate them. Because, most traffic court very rarely does commercials. They don't know commercial rules, right? Many respects. So part of it is to educate them about, the rules and regulations for commercial operators and the consequences
they're focused on local rules and laws. They're not even thinking about federal rules. Right. So that's tough for them.
Yeah.
I wonder, I know right now they say it was when you adjudicate it, there's a note that says adjudicated, convicted of different, I forget exactly what it says, but I don't remember if it retains the mention of the first one, like DWI adjudicated, library fines. I don't know. But just even more information would be helpful for carriers.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. And that was part of the request, was to retain the original, give the ability to retain the original violation.
Yeah. So CVSA is going to try to petition on this, though.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Cool. All right. Maybe let's see. We can talk a little bit about ELDs and hours of service quickly, because it is very much a boots on the ground. I know there were some interesting conversations about who should be put out for how much and when, particularly in the case of ELD fraud, which we've talked about on this podcast before. Shout out to our podcast with Sean Curry from NTSB. Go find it if you haven't listened to it. It's a really good one. But tell us a little bit about that conversation and the end results before we dive into driverless vehicles.
And Sean was there at the meeting too.
Nice.
So not
me, Sean Curry. He's cooler than me.
Curry, yeah. So driver committee had a very lengthy conversation about fraud. Colorado did a very detailed presentation on a driver, a series of violations that a particular driver and the inspector really did. They went and got bank records, all kinds of things from this driver, and reconstructed his logbook over an 8-day period, and found all kinds of the driver's log was between 1,000 and 3,000 miles off. And the ELD, the hours of service record, was totally reconstructed, nothing even close to what his actual trip was. Not even close.
In the same region, though, probably
not even close. Not even close. And in the 7-day period, that driver drove 76 hours.
Oh.
And traveled 5,200 miles in a 7-day period. So anyway, obviously it was a exception rather than the rule, but they found a lot of these circumstances. Oregon was there too. They found a number of circumstances, and so the
what are we going to do about it?
Well, the request for action was in the spring meeting. They voted for drivers to change the out of service criteria for drivers that tampered or manipulated their ELDs, their logbooks in such a way as it can't figure out what way is up, to put that driver out of service for 10 hours. That was the decision at the spring meeting. That's going to be voted on this fall. And so the request was to change that 10-hour requirement to 34 hours and put them out for 34 hours, because we don't know within that 7 or 8 day window whether that driver got enough rest or not. So they said, okay, well, let's just put them in a reset scenario. So there was a lot of conversation, probably an hour went on about this. The committee broke. They came back after lunch, had a further conversation. End result is they chose not to go the 34 hours out, kept it at 10. And I think the rationale was
you could just say, I don't have logs. You could just be like, right. I got no logs. And then you're put out for 10. That was
part of the discussion. And so that drivers will just start doing that. Number two, if you have 10 hours of rest, you have the opportunity to rehabilitate yourself to some degree. They're already falsifying, 34 hours. It's not going to make a difference to them. So I think the issue was really came up. You find those drivers, you take criminal action. You go under state statutes, you take them to court and put them behind bars. And that was really what a lot of the enforcement folks came around to in the room. You got someone that's really doing that type of activity, that's criminal activity, and they should be accountable to that accordingly.
There it is. See, I saw a short discussion, which I found interesting, and I'm not sure if you were present for it, but it was around driver was just hired by a new company, and they're not carrying their previous 7, and motor carriers are only required, to fill out a form essentially that says, this is how much I worked. Am I still good? But now drivers hit on roadside 2 days in. Do you recall that conversation? Do you know how it shook out?
Yeah. So the issue was, it's the previous 7 days is technically a carrier requirement to get the previous 7 days of hours. And what the conversation was, it's conflicting with what the driver's required to produce roadside, right? And so the driver has to produce the previous 7 days rods regardless. But
that's hard because you've switched an ELD system. You've got new logins. You probably didn't the old carrier probably didn't give you a printout of your logs. Like, it's just a difficult thing in practice.
It is a difficult thing. And so there was a conversation on how to address that. And the issue was there's guidance out there today that it's permissive to request the previous rods from the other carrier versus required. And that was some of the inconsistency that was presented during the conversation. And so that's something that did not come up for a vote.
Okay.
That was acted on.
Okay.
It's going to continue to be discussed.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. Kind of screaming into home here. Want to keep us on track as much as we can. Steve, in a few minutes, what should we know about from a driverless vehicle or a level 8 inspection? Anything sort of top of mind here?
I think people that aren't familiar with the level 8 electronic inspections should pay attention to it. The project, it's a pilot project that's continuing to advance. There's about 615,000 electronic inspections that have been done in the pilot. So there's more states coming on
These are
board.
inspections that happen in motion with no stoppage of the truck.
That's right. At highway speeds, roadside. So the pilot program can continue to advance. They're about soon going to advance into phase 2, which is starting to actually validate the data against authoritative data sources. Right now, it's just passing data back and forth. None of it counts towards the carrier profile. It's all separate, being separate right now. So that's, I think, get informed about it. And if, and the other thing that came up during the autonomous vehicle conversation, a number of changes to what's called the enhanced inspection. But there was an issue request that was brought to the attention of the Enforcement and Industry Modernization Committee by one of the states to say, look, we've got this enhanced inspection, which is essentially a point of origin inspection, but those AVs are not being looked at all through their life journey unless there's a reason to. And so one particular state said,
I like that vehicles have life journeys now.
Yes. So there's one of the states said this is a concern to us. It could present challenges with our statutory.
We should be able to inspect these vehicles.
Right. So they're going to create a work group to look, kind of evaluate that and look at that a little further.
Awesome. All right. Well, screaming into home, we're going to wrap it up here. Before we do, I just want to continue our game a little bit. Is it a commercial zone? I'll start with, I'll start with you, Steve. Chicago, Illinois.
No.
Oh, Chicago, Illinois is a commercial zone.
Not the whole city.
All right. It says it right here.
Well, hang on. Go ahead.
He's trying to Google it right now. Bert, Los Angeles, California.
Has to be, yes.
It ain't on the list, big dog.
Ain't on the list. Because it's Long Beach or something.
For our listeners at home, it's a 372 200s lists all of them, so you can check it out yourself.
There's lots.
All right, so let's bring it around the horn here, Steve. Like I said at the top, like Bert has said, this is CVSA is such a great meeting, such a great opportunity for carriers to get actionable intelligence from CVSA. Is there anything that we all need to keep on our radar? And what are the next steps? What are the things always coming out of this meeting? There's possible changes to out of service that we should think about, or petitions that might go to the agency that we should think about. So any top line issues like that you could speak to would be super helpful.
Yeah, I think if you're not involved, and if you maybe for the industry folks, if you know someone who is, what CVSA will come out with a list of all things they're going to be taking action on. They had 41 action items they acted on at the board meeting from all, lots of different things. And so we've talked about some of the major ones, but they'll send that information out. And so if you're not involved, you should get involved, and you can be informed of the things they're going to be taking action on. And it'll go out to the full vote of the CVSA member jurisdictions. And I think the last thing I'll leave you with is they do listen to industry. They really do. Being on both sides of the fence, I've seen it, and it just evidence of this meeting. They took some of our industry requests and agreed with them and are going to push them forward. So they didn't agree with all of them, but that's okay. At least they heard us out, and we had our opportunity to have our day in court, if you will. So
you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right?
And the other, you're right. And the other thing I'll note is, I give FMCSA credit. They have a large number of people that are there. And probably of all the industry meetings I attend, that's the most FMCSA staff that go to industry meeting. Yeah. And you have opportunities to talk to them too.
Important to have those relationships.
Yeah, for sure. And I give FMCSA credit. They get up there and a lot of times they're getting yelled at and screamed at, and I give them credit.
Can get emotional, that's for sure.
Yeah, they do. I've in the past, I've actually had to stop fights. This is not anything recent, but years ago, people went to fisticuffs in some cases. So it can get pretty exciting.
I like
a little entertainment value too.
Cool. All right. Well, Steve, thanks so much. Bert, anything else for the good of the order that you would like to share with the group, or maybe an emotional outburst to finish off? Something really nice?
No more emotional outbursts. Just not talk about the LP.
Sounds good. Well,
no, the only thing is, as we encouraged earlier, state associations and CVSA get involved. That's how you know. Stay in the know.
If you don't know how to get involved, holler at us. We're happy to help. Definitely important. It's good to get your voice heard. So, all right. Well, appreciate all of you. I hope you have a great rest of your day. And until next time, I need to develop a sign off. So that'll be my placeholder for now.
Thanks for listening to this episode of True North Truck Thought. If you enjoyed the topic today and want to tune in for future conversations here on the Triple T Pod, make sure to follow us. Also, please don't hesitate to let us know which topics you want us to cover in future episodes. Drop us a line in the comments section or send us an email to transportationnews@truenorthcompanies.com. Thanks and have a safe day.